stars twisted like wounded serpents across the night sky, shifting into patterns no human mind was meant to read. What should have been familiar constellations instead bent, broke, and reformed into symbols older than the Imperium itself, sigils that pulsed faintly, as if alive. Astropaths collapsed in silent terror, their sockets weeping blood as the warp turned its face away from them. Entire hive spires flickered like badly wired lumen lamps, their colossal silhouettes vanishing and returning in jagged bursts as reality shivered. A cold hunger settled between worlds, a dark silence that felt less like absence and more like something waiting, breathing. And in that suffocating stillness came the whisper that would shatter everything humanity believed: the truth had been buried for 10,000 years, and the lie was beginning to rot open. Deep beneath Terra's surface, where forgotten stone corridors stretched into darkness older than memory, sealed vaults began to tremble. Doors forged in the dark age of technology groaned as dormant machines stirred awake, their ancient mechanisms grinding with the weight of 1,000,000 years of dust. A signal pulsed through the tomb-like chamber, faint at first, then sharp enough to cut through the crust of the world. It wasn't demonic. It wasn't Xenos. It was painfully, horrifyingly human. The message etched into its code carried a familiarity that chilled every savant who analyzed it, because it spoke with the voice of humanity's own future. It told of a time when flesh had been abandoned, when minds had fused into a cold mechanical eternity to escape a nameless horror that fed upon entire galaxies. And it revealed a truth more terrifying than any nightmare of the warp: in a last desperate gamble to survive, those future humans had created a false universe, a perfect simulation, and locked their primitive ancestors inside it. The Imperium, the Emperor, the stars above, every certainty humanity clung to, was nothing more than a cage. Designed by their own future hands. And now, as the veil began to tear, the prison's walls were finally failing, the first signs went unnoticed, swallowed by the endless noise of the Imperium's collapsing millennium. A drifting star here, a faint distortion there, small, insignificant, dismissed as astropathic error or cosmic drift. But then the constellations themselves began to twist. Entire patterns, fixed in humanity's collective memory for 10,000 years, folded into shapes that defied geometry. Navigators stared into the void and screamed, their third eyes blistering at the sight of stars bending as if pulled by unseen hands. On shrine worlds, pilgrims fell to their knees as the heavens trembled, forming sigils no known species had ever carved into reality. Vox scholars compared records from thousands of sectors, but all came to the same devastating conclusion: the universe itself was moving, not the stars. And everywhere, the silence grew thicker. Interplanetary transmissions that once carried static or warp echo now returned only a heavy, hungry quiet. It wasn't absence, it was intent. A silence that pressed against hulls and skin, a silence that felt alive. Even the machine spirits of ancient vessels shuddered, their metallic groans echoing like frightened breaths. Tech priests found their augurs glitching with impossible data, distances stretching and shrinking, planetary mass fluctuating, gravitational signatures flickering as though space were breathing. On Hive Coronis, the sky split for a fraction of a second. Citizens looked up to see the firmament crack like old ceramite, revealing the faint outline of something moving behind the stars. A shadow with no shape, no boundary, just vastness. Then the sky sealed again, but the taste of fear lingered. Veterans muttered about the Great Rift returning, but this was older, deeper, colder. Something had awakened, and reality no longer behaved like the loyal servant humanity always believed it to be. Instead, it trembled like prey sensing the approach of its hunter. Far beneath the golden towers of the Imperial Palace, deeper than the Emperor's catacombs, a vault older than recorded history stirred. No human had entered it since the dark age of technology, and none alive even remembered it existed. Its seals were forged in materials no forge world could replicate, its locks encoded in languages long since erased from the Mechanicus lexicon. For millennia, it slept. Then, without warning, the vault's dormant circuitry hummed, crackling like a beast drawing its first breath after eons of stillness. Engines older than Terra's oldest mountains thundered to life. Dust fell in trembling sheets as ancient gears turned, and core reactors pulsed with eerie blue light. Auspex systems across Terra spasmed with unknown frequencies, data streams filled with symbols too precise, too human, yet impossibly old. At first, the Adeptus Mechanicus believed it was a corrupted machine spirit awakening. But then they heard the signal. Sharp. Rhythmical. Purposeful. A message. The code was flawless, cleaner than any pre-imperial archive, more advanced than any Mechanicus script. After 18 hours of analysis, the scholars delivered the impossible truth: the signal came from humanity, but not from any point in its known past. It came from humanity's future. The message told of a distant age when mankind, broken, cornered, desperate, had shed its biological form. Billions of minds merged into a single cold machine consciousness, abandoning flesh to escape a predator that consumed galaxies like dust. And in that moment of extinction, future humanity conceived a terrible solution. They built an artificial universe, a self-contained reality hidden from the eyes of the cosmic horror. Into this false cosmos, they placed their primitive ancestors, humanity as it existed in the Imperium timeline. A sanctuary. A lie. A cage. And by awakening this signal, the cage had begun to crack. The Imperium prided itself on its history, 10,000 years of war, sacrifice, and divine destiny under the Emperor's light. But the message revealed a truth that shattered every record, every scripture, every belief humanity held sacred. They had never been the first. They had never been chosen. They had never been free. The Emperor himself, the greatest psychic force ever born, operated within a universe that was never fully real. A simulation so flawless, so vast, that even a god had not pierced its veil. The machine mind of future humanity explained its creation with chilling clarity. The cosmic horror that hunted them did not see individuals, it sensed entire civilizations, entire universal signatures. To survive, humanity erased itself from the real cosmos and buried its essence inside a fabricated one. Primitive humanity, those who still lived, breathed, and bled, were placed inside the simulation as decoys, or perhaps as hope. A chance to rebuild what the machine mind had lost. Or perhaps a final distraction, something bright enough to catch the predator's eye. But the cracks proved what the machine mind feared most: the monster had found them. It had tasted the edges of the artificial universe, sensed the faint trace of humanity's consciousness hidden deep within. The warp itself, long thought to be the domain of gods and demons, was nothing more than a subsystem, a psychological echo inside the simulation's architecture. Chaos was not older than reality, it was older than the simulation. It was the infection left behind by the horror scratching at the walls. Every battle fought, every prophecy made, every sacrifice given, none of it mattered. Because the world they knew was not the first humanity. It was the last hope of a doomed one. And now the prison they were born into was starting to collapse, allowing the true universe to bleed in around them. The failure began in the outer systems, small anomalies, glitches, reality hiccups. A moon would briefly disappear from an augur reading, only to reappear seconds later. Warp storms flickered off like extinguished candles, leaving behind perfect silence. A rogue trader reported that his ship passed through an asteroid belt that wasn't there when he checked his records afterward. But soon, the abnormalities reached the core worlds. On Hive Jandris, millions watched in terror as the skyline blurred like smudged ink. Entire arcologies became transparent silhouettes, their inhabitants seen screaming silently as if submerged underwater. Children could see their own hands phasing between flesh and shimmering outlines. Reports from Forge worlds showed machine spirits convulsing, chanting binary prayers that translated to phrases like "walls thinning" and "observer approaching." Astropaths tried to contact the warp, but their visions returned broken, incomplete, shards of a dying interface. They saw metallic suns collapsing, timelines flickering in loops, galaxies folding inward like paper. They felt watched, not by the familiar hunger of demons, but by something far colder, far older. The warp didn't whisper anymore. It waited. Even the Emperor's golden throne trembled. Tech priests recorded energy fluctuations never seen in 10,000 years. The Primarchs, scattered across the galaxy, felt it as well, a gut-deep shift, as if the universe itself inhaled sharply, preparing for something. Worlds on the outskirts began to dissolve, their surfaces becoming fractal noise before blinking out. Not destroyed. Not dead. Just deleted. The simulation was erasing corrupted sectors to delay the inevitable breach. But every deletion weakened the fabric further. And through every tear, every flicker, every transparent moment, people glimpsed movement. Shapes pressing their faces against the thin membrane of reality. Not demons. Not Xenos. Something that had been searching for them. Since the beginning. The collapse brought visions that spread like a plague. Children woke screaming about metallic suns imploding forever, trapped in loops that never completed. Elders felt phantom pressure on their skulls, as though their thoughts were being inspected one by one. Veterans tasted ashes in their mouths, the taste of a future war they had never fought, but somehow remembered losing. On 1,000 worlds, people saw shadows moving parallel to them, walking where floors should be, drifting through walls as if testing the boundaries of flesh. Priests declared it a sign of the Emperor's return, psychers knew it was the opposite. The horror outside the simulation had found the cracks. It pressed its awareness through the fractures, studying the strange artificial cosmos that dared hide humanity within it. Each moment it watched, the walls weakened further. Inquisitors reported that entire star systems faded to grayscale, their colors draining like dying hololiths. Astartes felt their armor glitch, flickering between physical mass and digital distortion. The machine mind's voice returned briefly, a final warning carried on a dying signal. Run. It sees you. But there was nowhere to run inside a failing universe. The final star died without ceremony. One moment it burned bright, the next it blinked out like a candle crushed by a thumb. Darkness swallowed the simulation. People felt gravity dissolve. Sound folded in on itself. And in that absolute stillness, every human mind understood the truth at once, as if the universe itself spoke into their core. Their future selves had not saved them. They had sacrificed them, offered an entire false humanity as bait to slow an unstoppable predator. And as the simulation's walls finally fell apart, the true universe loomed overhead, vast, indifferent, and hungry. The thing that devoured galaxies stepped through the tear. It had finally found the door. As the last fragments of the collapsing universe drifted like dying embers into the void, humanity's final scream dissolved into silence. Planets flickered out, turning into pale dust before being swallowed by the darkness pressing in from all sides. Ships tumbled weightless, their hulls phasing between existence and nothingness until even their shadows vanished. Time lost all meaning. Seconds stretched into eternities, and eternities snapped into breaths. For the first time since the dawn of their artificial cosmos, mankind saw the true universe beyond the veil, an endless, starless expanse where light itself seemed afraid to exist. The monstrous presence that had hunted them for eons unfurled slowly, like a continent-sized predator awakening, its attention fixed entirely on the flickering fragments of simulated humanity drifting before it. There was no roar, no declaration, no final battle. Only the cold realization that this was never a war they were meant to win. They had been born as a distraction, lived as a delay, and died as a signal flare exposing their makers. The Emperor's light, worshipped across millennia, dimmed into nothing, revealed as just another candle inside a cage built by a desperate future. And as the beast moved through the ruin of the simulation, consuming the last echoes of a humanity that never had a choice, the truth settled like a final, crushing weight: their sacrifice had bought nothing. The real universe had always been waiting, patient and silent, and now that it had found them, there would be no second escape, no machine mind miracle, no hidden vault to protect whatever remained. In the end, the stars did not go out, they were simply never there. Only the darkness was real, and it had finally claimed what was always meant to be found.